There's been a lot of characters, plot lines and twists and turns in the 5 Black Ops games that precede Black Ops 6. But thankfully, a lot of it isn't that relevant. To prepare for Black Ops 6, I just played through the campaigns for Black Ops 1, and then Cold War, and then Black Ops 2, because they're the games that contain missions or events that take place before Black Ops 6, and are probably going to lead into it. And to be honest, I was surprised how little you need to know going into Black Ops 6. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through all the backstory you actually need to know heading into the new game. In this video, I'm just going to deal with the main campaign. If there's enough demand, so in the comments, then I'll do another video about what you need to know for zombies. Before we go any further, obviously there's spoilers for all the Black Ops games in this. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support me, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing. Right, let's get started with one of the most important characters in the Black Ops franchise, and that's Frank Woods. Woods is a soldier who worked for the CIA on Black Ops missions, and he fought alongside Alex Mason for much of his career. During a botched attempt to assassinate Castro in Cuba, this is at the beginning of Black Ops 1, Mason was left behind and he was separated from Woods. Woods kind of got away, and Mason nobly decided to hold the enemies off while the others got away. Mason ended up going to prison, going to the Vorkuta prison, more on that later. But after he managed to escape, him and Woods, alongside a CIA handler called Hudson, worked together to try and find Kravchenko and Dragovich, who are like the 2 main enemies, the 2 antagonists in Black Ops 1, through the events of that game. Along the way, they rescue a Russian who also works for the CIA called Grigory Weaver, and it appears that Woods sacrifices himself to take out Kravchenko. Kravchenko's got a live grenade, and Woods kind of jumps on him and takes him out of a window, and then you assume that both of them die. In reality, of course, they both survived, and Woods was captured by Kravchenko, he recovered first I guess, and held as a prisoner of war until he eventually escaped in 1972. After this, he went back to working for the CIA. Now, the next game kind of chronologically is actually Black Ops Cold War. In that, Woods works with Hudson again and Mason, and also another CIA operative called Russell Adler, and they're working together to try and track down Perseus. If the events of Warzone are considered canon, then after that, after everything they were doing trying to track down Perseus, Woods also had to rescue Adler from Stitch, who had attempted to brainwash him. Later on, in 1986, Woods was working for the CIA in Angola, and this is the beginning of Black Ops 2. There he came across Raul Menendez, who's the main antagonist of Black Ops 2. Menendez captured Woods and tortured him and all of his men, and ended up killing his men in front of him, to try and find out what the CIA knew about him. And then they ended up locking Woods in a container filled with the corpses of all of his men, and from there he was rescued by Mason and Hudson, and as you can imagine, he was pretty traumatized by that. Later, in a mission where they were going in to capture Menendez, Woods completely lost control of his desire for revenge for what Menendez did to him and his men, and he ends up throwing a grenade which accidentally kills Menendez's little sister. This is what sparks Menendez's mission for vengeance, which is the main plot of Black Ops 2. Later on, in a mission in Panama, Woods is given an order to shoot someone with a bag on her head, who Woods believes to be Menendez. It turns out it's actually Mason who'd been taken hostage, and depending on the player's choice, you either kill Mason with a shot to the head, or you hit him with a non-lethal shot, like to a limb or to the torso. Woods believes that he killed him anyway. Woods is then captured and taken to a room where there's David Mason, which is Alex Mason's young son, Alex Mason's seemingly lifeless body next to him, and Hudson. Woods is shot in both legs by Menendez with a shotgun. It's absolutely brutal, and that cripples him for life, while Hudson is executed right in front of him. Again, he believes Mason to be dead. And that basically takes us up to when Black Ops 6 will take place in the timeline, for Woods at least. It is worth noting that after the events of Black Ops 6, Woods gets discharged from the CIA because obviously he's been shot in both kneecaps and he can't walk anymore, and he ends up living in a nursing home. We see this in Black Ops 2. There he helps to give David Mason, Alex's son, information that leads to Menendez being defeated. At the end, if you only shot Alex Mason non-lethally in the Panama mission, Woods is reunited with Mason, who apparently has actually been alive, and he's surprised that he's alive, saying he hasn't seen him for 30 years. Right, on to Russell Adler. Adler is somehow being portrayed as maybe a possible villain in Black Ops 6. In the marketing, there's this idea that there's a mole within the CIA, and you're sort of led to believe that it's probably going to be Adler. There's lots of very sinister looking pictures of him. I think that's probably a red herring. It's a bit too obvious. Adler was introduced in Black Ops Cold War. He's another CIA operative working with Woods. He ends up capturing Bell, who's the player character in Black Ops Cold War, who was one of Perseus's agents, and then Adler decides to brainwash Bell, thanks to the insistence of another character who we'll talk about soon, to think that he had served in Vietnam with Adler to create a fake bond between them, hoping that Bell will be able to lead them to Perseus. He also imprints like a voice command in Bell so he can get Bell to do what he wants. This does end up working and they manage to stop Perseus's plan, but it shows that Adler is absolutely callous and cruel. He's not a nice person. He doesn't care about Bell's well-being at all. Once they finally deal with Perseus, Adler actually kills Bell just to tie up the loose end. Now again, we don't know if Warzone's story is canon within Black Ops 6, but in the Warzone 84 part of the game, Adler was actually captured by Stitch, who was a KGB agent who'd previously lost an eye to Adler in some kind of interrogation, who then went on to join Perseus. Stitch attempted to brainwash Adler in a similar way to what happens with Mason, and then after that he was rescued by Woods, but then goes rogue as a result of the brainwashing. He seemingly plants bombs all across Verdansk. I think he's the one that blew up all of Verdansk in Verdansk 84, and then Woods and Hudson managed to break his programming, and he returns to the CIA but just isn't fully trusted. Now, in general, I'd assume that most of what happens in Warzone probably isn't canon, because of Terminator and Godzilla and stuff like that. But this part seems to make sense with why Adler isn't trusted. What he did to Bell definitely wasn't good in Black Ops Cold War, but you never really got the sense that Woods didn't trust Adler. Now, with what happened in Verdansk, it definitely seems like Woods and Hudson don't trust him at all. On to the next character from Black Ops Cold War, Helen Park. Park is kind of a more minor character in Black Ops Cold War. She is always there, and at one point you get a choice as to whether she lives or dies, and I think the canon ending is that she lives, because otherwise she couldn't be in Black Ops 6, but she doesn't really do that much. She's an MI6 agent, so British, who works with the others to track down Perseus, and she's fully complicit in what Adler does to Bell, even being the one who suggests they try it after Adler's original interrogation fails, and she shows Adler how to do it. In the Warzone story, she's still a part of the group working with Adler, Woods and Hudson after the events of Black Ops Cold War, so you can kind of assume she just kind of stuck with them, I guess. I'm not really sure if that's how the CIA and MI6 work, but within Call of Duty it is. Anyway, all you need to know about Park is that she's British, she's from MI6, and she's kind of just as dodgy as Adler is, although she hasn't been brainwashed as far as we know. Now finally, probably the most controversial character to include in this list is Mason. Now the Call of Duty developers have stated repeatedly that Mason's death in the events of Black Ops 2 are canon. They've said over and over again that Mason is dead. But they also keep on emphasizing the truth lies, so I think there's a decent chance that Mason is actually going to be back within Black Ops 6. I think that's just part of their marketing is, oh, don't even trust us when we keep saying this. So who is Mason? Mason was a CIA operative alongside Woods and Hudson back in Black Ops 1. Mason was captured in Cuba, so like I said, he held the enemies off while Woods escaped, and then Mason was taken to Vorkuta, which is like a big kind of gulag Russian prison camp. It's like a big mine. It actually appears in Black Ops 6 as a small multiplayer map, Pit. Anyway, there he was brainwashed by both Kravchenko and Reznov. Kravchenko was a baddie. He wanted to use him as a weapon to assassinate JFK, so he was going to brainwash him like he did apparently to lots of other Americans, and then he was going to use these numbers to be able to trigger him and give him commands to make him assassinate the president. Reznov, who's a good Russian, he was also a prisoner in Vorkuta. Reznov wanted to reprogram him to take out the people responsible for the Nova 6 gas. So Reznov had been a Russian soldier who'd ended up getting involved in this sort of thing that some Russians were doing, where they were developing a really powerful nerve gas called Nova 6, and they were essentially loose ends, and he saw a load of his men killed in front of him, and then he was sent to prison. So he obviously wanted revenge for this. Now Mason broke out of Vorkuta with Reznov, but they got separated as they exited. And in Black Ops 1, you begin the game as Mason, strapped to a chair, being interrogated by Woods and Hudson. Mason's haunted by hallucinations of Reznov. You keep seeing him in the game, but at the end of Black Ops 1, they tell you that Reznov was never with you after you escaped from Vorkuta. Everything else has been in your head. Now, I know the kind of Call of Duty wikis and the fan community are very much of the opinion that Reznov did survive and that he appears in other things. He appears again in Black Ops 2 very briefly, but again, as a hallucination. And then apparently he emails Mason at one point, which is a weird thing for hallucination to do. But in Black Ops, in the actual games, they make it pretty clear that they think Reznov is dead. At least Woods and Mason think that Reznov's dead. But anyway, we're talking about Mason. And so Mason keeps having these hallucinations of Reznov and a set of mysterious numbers that can be used to control people that have been brainwashed. You know, the numbers, Mason, that's like the big thing that everybody remembers from Black Ops. That's what it's talking about. It's these numbers that were involved in the brainwashing that can then be used to control him. He does occasionally lose control when he's around his targets, and while he ends up seemingly being kind of snapped out of his brainwashing after the death of Reznov's targets, everyone still kind of has their doubts, and it's implied that he goes on to assassinate JFK as well. That's in the kind of post-credits bit in the original Black Ops game. Then Mason carries on working for the CIA after all this, and he also has a son, David, who we see him being very harsh to at the beginning of Black Ops 2 when David's young. You know, they're both climbing a tree, David's not very good at it, and Mason's like giving him a hard time about it. Later on in the game, he's captured by Menendez, and he's the one that gets a bag placed over his head to trick Woods into shooting him. This is where the player gets a choice as to where they shoot Mason, which affects his fate. If you shoot him in the head, he is completely dead. If Mason does survive the events of Black Ops 2 in 1989, we don't know what happens to him for the next 36 years, until he appears in a post-credits scene in 2025, where we see that Woods hasn't seen him in all that time. So if Mason is alive during the events of Black Ops 6, we at least know that he doesn't interact with Woods at all. Woods doesn't know that he's still alive. But I think the fact that they've left this big 30-year convenient gap for him, and the fact that in the marketing they keep on making a big deal about how he's dead and a big deal about how the truth lies, I sort of think that Mason's going to be coming back. I wouldn't even be that surprised if we didn't see Reznov again, because if Reznov is still alive and he did manage to escape Vorkuta, so Hudson and Woods are just mistaken thinking that Reznov's dead, then it kind of makes sense, we don't know what's happened to Reznov, he could be involved in the story as well. So I'm kind of expecting in Black Ops 6 there to be some kind of side story maybe, where we get to see that both Reznov and Mason are doing something together maybe. But that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's not actually all that complicated. There's not that many characters coming back from previous Black Ops games into this one. I don't think there's too much for you to learn before you go to Black Ops 6. If you did enjoy this video and you want something similar for Zombies, Zombies is a tiny bit more complicated, particularly because of Maxis and Richtofen. So if you want that, make sure you let me know in the comments, and if there's enough interest in it, then I'll do one of those before Black Ops 6 comes out. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, turn your notifications on. I'll of course be bringing you tons of Black Ops 6 content as soon as it goes live. Right now you can check out my video where I'll show you how to launch Black Ops 6 early. And it actually turns out you can do that whether you're on Xbox, PC, or even on PlayStation. So check that video out now.